So at this moment, what is Three Eye Atlas?
Well, it's most likely a natural object, but there are some very unusual facts about it that make us suspect that maybe it's technological. I can mention those because I regard it just like a potential black swan event. You know, these are the events where we give a very low probability to something happening, but then it has a huge impact on society. And what that means is that we should take them seriously. For example, a terrorist attack, you know, the chance is very small, and indeed on September 11th, nobody paid attention, and then something bad happened. So we really need to collect all the facts. And Three Eye Atlas is one of those cases because we have a visitor to our backyard. And if it's technological, you know, it might come through our front door or send some devices that get to Earth. And we just need to monitor it and make sure that it's just an icy rock. Now, what was quite surprising about it is that it came in the plane of the planets around the sun. You know, there is a plane where all the planets within a few degrees are orbiting around the sun in the same plane. And this object came within 5 degrees of that plane. And that is a very small probability event because the chance is 1 in 500. And this is the third object from outside the solar system that we spotted. If we had hundreds of them, it would be natural for one of them to be in this plane. But for the third object to be in that plane, that's quite surprising. And so it suggests maybe the trajectory of this object was designed by some intelligence. And then the object is extremely massive. It's of order 1 million times more massive than the first object we found. And why did we why were we so lucky to receive such a huge package into the inner solar system? Then it came close to Mars and Venus, and it will come close to Jupiter on March 16th, 2026. And it was hiding behind the sun when it came closest to the sun. We couldn't look at it then. And it has also a glow, a halo of bright light around it that is extended towards the sun, which is quite unusual for comets because usually you get a tail. So we're seeing an anti-tail. Instead of gas or dust being pushed away from the sun, we see something extending from the object towards the sun. And that was true when it arrived, you know, and was moving towards the sun back in July when it was discovered. And it's also true now when after it passed closest to the sun on October 29th. There was a recent image from the Hubble Space Telescope that indicates that indeed this halo of light around it is teardrop shaped and it's pointing towards the sun again. So that has to be explained. You know, all these anomalies have to be explained. If it's a natural object, then you know, we should have a good reason for it having those. And I didn't even mention that it has nickel with very little iron in the gas around it. And we always find nickel and iron in similar amounts in natural comets. And the only place where we find nickel without iron is in industrially produced alloys that we technologically produce. So that raised the alarm for me, and that's why I'm so interested in this object.
Okay. I recognize that you qualify your exploration as the potentiality for a black swan event, that the probability is still that it is a natural object from outside of our solar system. But I want to walk through quickly the 4 markers that you talk about that make it raise your eyebrows. And so first is size. I've seen you compare it to the size of Manhattan, right? So it's roughly, if I have this correct, 3 miles or 3 kilometers in diameter, which is different than the other 2 interstellar comets that have come through, I believe, in the last 50 years or so. Is that right? How long we've been monitoring these interstellar comets? So in the last 50 years...
only over the past decade, we started discovering those interstellar objects. And the reason is simple. The US Congress tasked NASA to find 90% of all objects bigger than a football field that may collide with Earth. So NASA started building these observatories. One of them is Pan-STARRS in Hawaii. Another one is the Rubin Observatory in Chile that was just inaugurated in June. And the Atlas telescope was also one that discovered this object. So that's a result of looking for rocks that may impact the Earth that every now and then we see an object that moves too fast to be bound to the sun. So it came from outside the solar system. It was just a result of the past 8 years that we started discovering them.
Okay. Okay, just in the last decade, as you point out, and this is the biggest one that we've discovered in that time.
Oh, yeah, it's big by a large margin. That's the issue, yeah. It's as big as Manhattan
and so that takes me to
the... Yeah, sorry.
That takes me to the second piece of red flag that raises your eyebrows, and that is the plane that it is traveling on. You talked about it's 5 degrees off of the planetary plane, which is a 1 in 500 probability. My only skepticism or question on that I would ask for clarification on is, if we're only been studying this, capable of studying this for 8 years, how unique actually is 3I Atlas? Couldn't it have been much more common before we were capable of observing it? So, for example, I was, and I'm an expert, like I slept at the Holiday Inn Express last night. I did my AI and Wikipedia research in preparation for a conversation with you, but I was like, remind me the difference between 3I Atlas and Halley's Comet. I'm old enough that I remember Halley's Comet in 1986. It was a huge pop culture event. But Halley's Comet has been around, right, since the 1500s or so when it was first observed. And it comes back every 75 years. But these types of things that you're talking about now, they don't have that history of observation. So is it possible that before the last 8 years, we were getting a lot of these types of comets on the planetary plane?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the fact that we see these objects over the past decade, means that there were, almost 1 billion of them over the age of the history of the Earth that passed near Earth this way, because, we've just been monitoring the sky over this decade, but the traffic of interstellar objects through the solar system doesn't depend on whether we look. Just think of a highway when you are going to bed. I mean, the cars don't stop going there. So we were just unaware of this. There are lots of things that we were unaware of. We thought the Earth is at the center of the universe. We were unaware of what lies outside the solar system until the last century or so. We just build the telescopes now that can monitor such objects because they cover a large portion of the sky. And then we find these objects. But of course, they were going through the solar system. We were not aware of them. And the question is whether any of them might be technological, alien technology, rather than rocks. And, when you get objects into your backyard from the street, you might assume that most of them are similar to the objects you have in your backyard, like rocks. But every now and then you may get a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor. And that's a completely new way of finding that you have a neighbor. In the past, we were waiting for a phone call, a radio signal. And over the past 65 years or so, we haven't detected any. But maybe nobody is calling us when we are listening. Maybe they called a long time ago. Who knows? If you check your backyard for packages that may have arrived from the neighborhood, you might find some letters in the mailbox, and even if the sender is dead, the difference is that those packages are confined by gravity to the Milky Way galaxy. They don't run away like light or radio signals. Radio signals move at the speed of light. They escape. If you don't catch them at the right time, they're gone. Whereas these objects are accumulating over time. So imagine another civilization that, just like us, sent a spacecraft like Voyager. Voyager, by the way, you may ask, I wrote a paper about it. Where will Voyager be in 1 billion years? It will be on the opposite side of the Milky Way galaxy. It can, with technologies we developed in the 1970s, we can actually make it to the other side of the Milky Way galaxy within less than 1 billion years. That's amazing. And that means that they could have reached us, any other civilization, because most of the stars are older by billions of years than the sun. The sun is a relatively late star. It just formed in the last 1/3 of cosmic history. So we know for sure that there were, tens of billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone, where you could have had the technological civilization, because 10% of all the stars have a planet the size of the Earth, roughly at the same separation from the stars.